Okay, the story of the English or common oak, the white oak. Oak bean is the name of the tree's name is oak bean. So here we go. W is going to be the person that is asking the questions. So W says, there are many different types of oaks. The English or common oak is one of the most widespread in our latitudes and figures strongly in the awareness of people living here. And why is this? Oak bean says, that's very simple. It's because oaks used to be sacred trees and were dedicated to Odin. They figured in human minds as the most important trees of all. Have you ever seen a proper chirp or dwelling mound? W says yes. Oak bean, do you know why people so often planted oaks on them? W says, as protection, probably. Oak bean says, but against what? W says, I don't know. Oak bean says, you're an idiot. They were to protect against ice. Icebreaker oaks. Along the Elbe River, for instance, there were many icebreaker oaks. And when the Elbe flooded and the flooded water turned to ice, the oaks broke it up. An oak is an extremely solid, stable tree. Okay, this paragraph is endurance and stability. W says, is the essence of the oak therefore endurance or something else? Oak bean says, oh, a great deal more. The oak has the problem that its overseeing planet, Mars, has changed in significance, as has the metal assigned to it, iron. The wood of the oak is very hard, and when immersed in water, even more so. It can survive centuries or even millennia. Mars has generally been assigned a connection with warfare and was the Roman god of war. The Greeks called him Ares, A-R-E-S, and in Teutonic myth he was called Tyr, T-Y-R. The corresponding day is Tuesday. However, the god to whom the oak was assigned in northern and central Europe is Odin, who has quite different quality from Mars. If you ponder this at leisure, you can sense that the Teutonic people had an inkling of this change in meaning. Buddha went to dwell on Mars, a process which did not just happen from one day to the next, but Buddha transformed Mars into a planet of love. Buddha changed Mars from an iron-hard planet of battle to a leading planet of loving kindness. This was a Christ-like event. Wolf says, let us return to you as a tree. The common oak forms a lanky and widespread crown. What can you tell us about this shape? Oak bean says, since I am an expansive and lanky tree, I need a corresponding crown. You can find shade beneath this crown. You can also find protection there, given by the chief of the Nordic gods. I would like to point out, however, that other siblings of mine amongst the oaks have very different crowns, although almost all of their crowns are large. Oak trunks can be very different from each other. Some put on a thick girth immediately, while others have a very tall trunks. We tend to have a broad girth, and here you can see our power of endurance and durability. And Wolf says, what can you tell me about the bark of the oak? In youth, this is a smooth and brownish color or even a whitish gray, whereas in old age it becomes extremely thick with vertical fissures. And Oak bean says, oak bark contains a tanning agent and has a very high tannic acid content, which enhances digestion. In former times, people used oak bark for removing fur from animal skins and tanning them. oak bark has an astringent effect. This is titled The Individualists Among Trees. Furthermore, Oakbean says, we have a pronounced individuality. Every oak has its own character. A different one for each tree, I mean. As a human being, when you encounter such a tree, it is like the meeting of two selves. This individualism usually penetrates right into the separate acorns. An acorn is very hard and compact. Has one ever fallen on your head? It hurts and will certainly make an impact on you. With a birch or a willow, on the other hand, it wouldn't. W says, why does the oak form such a deep and powerful taproot? Oakbean says, its depth means I can survive well in relatively dry conditions. Some oaks can even grow in desert regions. The convex bulges on my leaves also show that I cope well with heat. The leaves of the common oak are rounded and at the same time have a leathery quality, so I evaporate less water through my leaves than softer leaves do. W says, why are both the crown and the leaves so irregular? Oakbean says, every leaf of mine also has something individual about it. We are quite simply the tree of individuality that's also connected with iron and meteoric iron. Meteoric iron. That must have something to do with meteorites, maybe? I don't know. Anyhow, W says, why do the leaves have such short stalks? Oakbean says, this is not true of every type of oak, but it is of the common oak. Its acorn sits stingy on a stalk, whereas you may get 2 or 3 together on other oaks. The leaf stalk is what gave me my German name, Steilechi, or stalk oak, but actually it has scarcely any stalk at all. The Cecily oak has a longer leaf stalk, but we are not that different in character. The subject is lightning conductor. W asks, why do oaks often divide into numerous branches quite near the ground, giving the impression of 2 trees, or rather a 2-tiered tree? Oakbean says, this is often the result of a lightning strike. Since we have a connection with iron, as lightning does, the oak is very often struck by lightning. More than any other tree. It is mere supposition that the taproot is responsible for this. The crown often divides at the scar where the lightning struck. There's another reason for this split too, which lies in our protective nature. You can protect a greater area if you divide up above. Oaks with a long straight trunk usually have a less expansive crown than those which divide very early on. The division of the trunk and crown allows us to include a greater area around our protection. In northern Germany, it was common to cultivate oaks because they provided pig fodder, were seen as trees of Odin and served as the protective trees. They also acted as local lightning conductors. The oak offers not only spiritual but also physical protection. Chapter heading, Closing Wounds and Healing. W asks, can you expand a little more on my earlier question about the bark? Oakbean says, our bark has a distinctive quality. If you saw off an oak branch, the wounds seal up again. A wound can seal entirely, which is one reason why we grow so old. If our wounds are not too severe, we can always close them up, and this is a property that has medical uses. We help close up and heal wounds in human skin. One result of this characteristic, however, is that the oak loses its smoothness with increasing age, since our bark interacts intensely with the air and becomes fissured. The oak's warmth emerges in the same way that the crust of a loaf opens during baking, but this is also the area in which the oak can heal. We cast off our acorns. W says, what can you tell me about the shape of the acorns and the cups in which they sit? Oakbean says, there are cups of varying sizes. Some come almost halfway up the acorn, while others are so shallow that the acorn can scarcely sit in them. The formation of this part is, again, an expression of our strong individualism. You can almost say that the acorn is sitting on a presentation dish and can easily be released from the tree. We are the complete opposite of the honey locust and its leathery fruits. We release our fruits, whereas they keep them for themselves. We cast off our acorns and give them away. That is our gesture. In former times, as I mentioned, pigs were herded into oak woods, and the ones which ate us gave the best bacon. The shape of the acorn also embodies the oak's tendency to be itself. It does not hide away, but shows the world that it is a courageous tree. You won't get off very lightly if you try to pick a fight with me. Excuse me. Sometimes we have branches in our crown without foliage, without leaves. In other words, we carry dead wood around with us. When these branches and twigs are cast off during the next strong wind, we can easily heal the wounds they leave. We are vulnerable, but can heal up again. W says, why do the oak leaves stay hanging on a tree right into the winter? And Oakbean says, our leaves are not really dispelled from frost, but instead pushed away by the new buds. Depending on the temperature, these buds from either in the autumn or in the spring, we have a relationship with warmth. When warmth fades, we keep our old leaves as a protective coat. Why is your wood such high quality? And Oakbean says, because it's so dense, it is hard, easily split, and also often shrinks, but if well stored, it is extremely dense. The timber is reddish-brown in color, which visually emanates a great deal of warmth. W says, please reflect on the human being and tell me which quality in him corresponds to you. Oakbean says, down-to-earth straightforwardness, positive, fatherly qualities, but not in a despotic sense. We also correspond to the human protective instinct, along with the fighting spirit and endurance. W says, what is the gull-wasp relationship to the oak? Oakbean says, that's really very simple. The oak has a bitter quality, a very high tannin content. This is why it needs a creature that can cope with this extreme bitterness to fertilize it. This is why the spirits of creation made the gall-wasp. The gall-wasp lives with the oak. It cannot survive without us, and we need it for fertilization. The gall-wasp lives in a symbiosis with us. You humans have also made use of the gall-wasp. You used to prepare ink from its cocoon. You no longer need to do that. And this corresponds with Odin, who hung for 4 days on a windy tree and was wounded because he brought writing into the world. The first runes were etched in wood with stone, and later on people began to use ink. That is all on the white oak.